sweet smell of fall is here. An intoxicating aroma, the sweet smell of the wood stoves burning, the air getting crisp into the evening sky. But there's something else that's really special that happens around this time of year. I break out my copy of Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. And get ready, for while it may be a horrible night to have a curse, it's always a blessing to play one of my favorite games in the franchise. Almost 3 years ago, I started the show with the original intention to create a rebuttal to the hatred that spewed from the internet regarding Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. But alas, it was sadly never to be made, due to a slew of technical problems. So what better time is it than the Halloween season to resurrect a favorite project of mine that I never actually got to complete? There's plenty of reasons why people have latched onto the idea that this is a bad game. The translation is confusing at times, there's grinding, clues can be vague, and getting the real ending takes multiple playthroughs, especially for first-timers. But the magic from the first game is there, and while it hasn't taken a turn for the worst, I would say it actually evolved. Even though I won't be releasing, I guess you could say, episode 0 of Dude You Haven't Played This Game, I hope to shine a new morning sun on Castlevania II: Simon's Quest to vanquish the horrible night that it's had to endure. Konami's smash hit Castlevania raised the bar for action-themed video games and brought a chilling gothic style that the series could call all its own. So when it came time for a sequel, the developers pulled all the stops for the North American 1988 release on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Creating a non-linear world for the protagonist to traverse, Simon was no longer bound by point A to point B. Castlevania II: Simon's Quest was a game that solidified a true atmosphere for the series to play in outside of the castle walls. While it was and is one of the many black sheep of the Castlevania family, those who can appreciate the differences will also enjoy the games that now ex-Konami employee Koji Igarashi created. So what gets people's skin crawling? Well, sometimes the best place to start is from the beginning. You begin the game as Simon Belmont, your trusty hero from the original Castlevania. This title is a direct continuation of the series, taking place 7 years later in the franchise's timeline in the year 1698. After previously defeating Dracula, the Lord of Darkness put a curse on our hero that would kill him at a young age if he didn't resurrect Dracula. To do this, Simon had to gather up his 5 body parts. Apparently, Dracula only had 5 body parts. Who knew? The rib, heart, eyeball, ring, and nail are waiting in various castles all over the land. The object of the game is to traverse from mansion to mansion, buying an oak stake and using it to unleash Dracula's parts from their crystal prisons. Most of the body parts give secondary abilities as well. The rib blocks projectiles, the heart gets you across the river if you show the ferryman, the eyeball uncovers clues and false bricks, the nail allows you to break open those same false bricks, and the ring, well, all that does is get you into Dracula's castle. Lame, I know. Switching back and forth from the nail and eyeball seems pointless when you can just leave the eyeball selected and use holy water. Speaking of holy water opening fake stones, there are a ton of sub-weapons in this game, such as 3 different daggers, all of which have different levels of distance and power when thrown, a diamond that ricochets off the ground and bounces all over the room to attack, and flames that are a solid alternative to holy water, and they do devastating damage. Throughout the game you can get secret weapons from these strange figures who walk back and forth. Though they can be also found in buildings offering various wares, they aren't always easily accessible. Sometimes they'll have different colors, but getting to these guys is not something that's easy to do on your own. That's why you gotta break out the NES Atlas. Yeah, mine's gone through some pretty heavy use, but it's a heck of a lot better than playing with the Castlevania II: Simon's Quest World of Power book.
Oof, what a stinker!
Back then, there were no online walkthroughs or video tutorials, so you had to settle for magazines like Nintendo Power. It was no different for any game. In fact, there are so many circumstances where I can say that Nintendo Power helped me out, and yet various other games don't get flack from gamers for not holding your hand. Where's the hate for the original Zelda and the lack of clues to reach the 5th dungeon? Castlevania II gets a bad rap, but Zelda gets off because it's Zelda? How is that fair? Anyways, the clues in Castlevania II can absolutely be vague and weird. Part of this is because of translation. This has been a hot topic of conversation for years. Gamers have complained that the game misled or gave clues from townspeople that were either untrue or extremely vague. Why has this been an issue for so many people for so long? Did no one read the manual? Another warning from the spirit. A few friendly villagers are town pranksters and their clues are false. Of course, you'll never know until you take the chance. How much clearer did you need it to be, people? Granted, some of these are just weird, and partially due to very broken English translation, or lack of proper grammar. Let's take a look at a couple of these. To restore your life, shout in front of the church. Hey! Hey! To replenish Earth, kneel by the lake with the blue crystal. Damn it. So we know that the townspeople are deliberate liars in many cases. In others, the clues couldn't be any clearer. One clue says to hit your head on Deborah Cliff. Or is it Deborah? I don't know. I always used to call the Algebra Woods the Algebra Woods. So you're supposed to hit your head on this solid wall of rock to make a hole. Okay, pretty vague and also impossible. But another clue you find says to wait for a soul with a red crystal on whatever it's called, Deborah Cliff. Basically, select a red crystal and wait at Deborah Cliff. Hitting your head? Obviously a lie, but still, once you put the clues together, they make a lot more sense than they do separate. Regardless, never trust the townspeople 100%. One theory behind the reason for the lies is that the townspeople are also being affected by the curse that Dracula has placed on Simon. Monsters have been released and the innocent townsfolk are probably growing paranoid, worrying about living day to day. But as you get closer to Dracula, the townspeople get stranger and stranger. You know you're getting close when you're being told to turn back. I always thought that this built a stronger atmosphere for the game, and while the first Castlevania focused more on linear gameplay and fighting a different monster at the end of each level, I feel like Castlevania II built up such an incredible environment for the series. Applying fear through the townspeople to the player made this a scary game. There were so many enemies that came over from the first game, it's hard to forget the new ones, such as the floating creepy eyeball heads, the annoying blobs in the castle, and the spiders that cascade down on a thin strand of web, plus the giant mummies with the erratic speed patterns, the radioactive green ghouls that haunt the town at night, plus Noob Saibot. Oh come on, it's totally him, you know it. Simon had a world to play in, with beautiful green trees that towered above him, gorgeous blue skies that faded in and out as the morning grew tired and evening came out to play. Huge mansions that felt hollow and empty, yet full of bouncing gargoyles, evil knights, and even Death himself. Yeah, let's talk about the mini-bosses in this game. While most of the enemies are easy to kill, the limited controls of the first game continue to haunt players in this title as well. Once you jump, you're stuck with it. And when you die 3 times, you lose all your hearts as punishment for your errors. The grinding elements of killing to collect hearts is so you can use them as currency, and while some weapons do use hearts like in the previous game, hearts are better spent upgrading your whip to the chain whip and later the Morning Star. Taking a page from Metroid, Simon's Quest only had 2 major baddies before Dracula, Carmilla's Mask Vampira, and Death himself. Many reviewers like to point out how easy it is to defeat Death, as opposed to the other games in the series. However, players are rewarded for defeating Death in combat. If you can defeat Death, you'll acquire the most powerful dagger in the game, one that will come to help you take down Vampira, Carmilla's mask. Though you only fight her mask in this game, Carmilla is an important part of Castlevania lore. While Dracula was based on Bram Stoker's book of the same name, Carmilla is based on a story by Sheridan Le Fanu's novella called Carmilla. The story involved a vampire woman named Carmilla who specifically went after females to quench her bloodlust. Now, this book's character of Carmilla was inspired by a real-life Hungarian countess, Erzsébet Bathory, who supposedly bathed in virgin women's blood to maintain her youthful figure. The masked Vampira in this game is also based on the mask that the novella's antagonist Carmilla wore to masquerade parties, so she could remain anonymous while searching for women to feed on. Side note, Elizabeth Bartley, an antagonist from Castlevania Bloodlines, is also a take on the famous Blood Countess, but whoa, we're getting way off track here. The music in this game defined the series for me. While Castlevania's soundtrack by Kinuyo Yamashita was brilliant and set the standard for the future of the series' sound, Kenichi Matsubara designed a soundtrack with fewer songs that all fit perfectly in place. Bloody Tears, the daytime track in the game, went on to become one of the most beloved songs in video game history. And while some people complain about the password system in the game, just know that the songs you know and love in this game would have been drastically affected in a negative way. Hear me out here. Simon's Quest originally launched as a Famicom Disk System game under the title Dracula II Noroi no Fuin, loosely translated to Dracula II The Seal of the Curse. Though the Famicom Disk System allowed save states, the music was nowhere near as awesome as the North American release. Since the manufacturing of battery backup hardware in carts was more expensive, Konami opted to release the game in North America and Europe with a password system instead. And that makes sense because all that was out there is the Nintendo. Now, using the extra memory space, they were able to enhance the music, and every track is a classic, and there's no mistaking the Castlevania sound here. Just know, it could have been worse. So thanks, password system, wherever you are. Many complain about Dracula's castle being the weakest part of the game, and I must agree with them. After reaching Castlevania, a place typically filled with monsters and mayhem, you just walk down a dark, lonely path, not battling any enemies, until you reach Dracula. It's kinda creepy, but at the same time, the level of tension built up should have involved fighting something else other than just Dracula. The easiest way to defeat him is to make sure you possess the Flame Whip power-up and a few laurels for protection, and honestly, it's one of the most boring final bosses in the series' history. What a letdown. So would I say Castlevania II Simon's Quest is a bad game? No, not at all. In fact, I think it's a great experiment that would later inspire a different direction of the series. Most of the hate that this game gets is from people just rallying with the character that they know and love and respect online. When you break down the game for what it is, it stands out as a flawed but fun action platformer with fantastic sound effects and music, and a really awesome graphical palette that's gorgeous for the fall season. Pizza man! It's weird, I didn't order any pizza. Well, come on in anyways. No! Dracula!
Pepperoni with a side of Castlevania Judgment, anyone? Mwahahaha!